And we're off. Today is Friday, January 6th. It's our live streaming Friday afternoon discussion. And this week's discussion is about post-market surveillance plans. For those of you that caught my podcast with another regulatory consultant that's from the EU, he's actually from Switzerland, the Easy Medical Device podcast. I think he's going to be posting in about a week or so. So depending on whether you're watching this as a recording or you're watching it live, you can see that, and where I talked about what are the requirements of post-market surveillance in the U.S. And there really aren't a lot of post-market surveillance requirements in the U.S. There are requirements for Class 3 devices. There are requirements for a few Class 2 devices that are somewhat problematic, things like duodenoscopes and other devices that have encountered some problems after they've gone on the market. But there's almost nothing in the way of normal 510K devices that require post-market surveillance in the US. So a lot of US companies come to me and say, well, we don't have a requirement for procedure. Why do we have to do post-market surveillance? It's very important that you do post-market surveillance for three things minimum. Number one, you need to have post-market surveillance as an input into your design control process. It's supposed to be an input so you can identify what's wrong with existing devices that are already on the market and what's wrong with previous versions of your device, so you can identify those as malfunctions or deficiencies in those designs, identify them as risks, and design risk controls in your new version of your product that's going to replace other products on the market or replace your previous version of the product. So that's number one reason why you need post-market surveillance as an input into your design process. And because the FDA recognizes 14971 2019 as a recognized standard, and they expect you to be using risk management as part of your design process, even though it's not a requirement in your post-market submissions, or pre-market submissions, such as the 510K, it is an expectation to be in your de novos. They cover risk management, certainly in software submissions, certainly in human factors submissions, and certainly in your design history file, they expect to see risk management. So that's number one. Number two, if you are going to be submitting any device that has human factors requirements, you have to do a risk analysis for that. You have to identify any particular use errors that occur for other devices that are already on the market. So what the FDA actually expects you to be doing is going in and looking at the three-letter product code for your device and identifying all the use errors for that three-letter product code. And they want you to identify what things that are adverse events are use errors and what things are not use errors, and make sure that you include those use errors in your hazard analysis or your human factors use-related risk analysis, or URRA. And they want to make sure that you've identified risk controls for those, and that you've identified them as critical tasks, and that you've looked at how effective are your risk controls in your summative usability testing. So that's number two. You need to do that post-market surveillance of adverse event databases, both for your previous versions of your product and any other competitor products in your three-letter product code, to identify any potential use errors as an input into your human factors process. The third thing that you need to do post-market surveillance for is cybersecurity. A lot of people aren't familiar with the cybersecurity requirements. It's specific to software for the most part. It's not specific to only software. You could have other devices. You look at wireless issues, interoperability issues, firmware, the ability to download data and communicate with hospital information systems. There's a lot of ways cybersecurity can come into play. But if you have software and there's any kind of communication of that software wirelessly or even through a USB or SD card, then you're going to have to address cybersecurity concerns. And part of that is to have a post-market surveillance cybersecurity plan. And they want you to execute that plan as you launch your product, they want you to go out there and see, are there any off-the-shelf software that we're using that have vulnerabilities? Does our operating system have vulnerabilities? Are there any libraries that created a vulnerability for us? Is there any accessory that now can be used with our device that can cause a problem? Those are all the kinds of things you would have in a post-market cybersecurity plan. So that's another element that requires post-market surveillance. So those three: number one, looking at post-market surveillance as an input into your design process for improved designs. Number two, identifying use errors for your use-related risk analysis. And three, post-market cybersecurity risks should be identified. So once you have those three things covered, if you have a de novo device, you're going to have to do a benefit risk analysis as well. There are a handful of, I want to say there's one de novo that has a post-market 522 plan that is required by the FDA. There may be more in the future. There's certainly some humanitarian device exemption devices, some PMA products that require benefit risk analysis. And that could certainly, if it was a class 3 device with a PMA, could require some post-market surveillance and actually submitting post-market surveillance reports as part of your confirmation that your risk controls are effective at minimizing or reducing the risks associated with your device. But if you're doing any business in Europe, they want you to go one step further. They want you to compare your device to the state of the art. Now, when you do a benefit risk analysis for a de novo, they want to show that it has a positive benefit over the risk relative to other devices that are state of the art, or the terminology they usually use is the standard of care. And that's also the criteria that they use for breakthrough device designations. So if your company is doing a de novo submission, doing a PMA submission, doing a humanitarian device exemption, or doing any kind of a submission to Europe, you're going to have to do this benefit risk analysis, and you're going to have to show that your device, even breakthrough device designations, you're going to have to determine that your device is at least as good as the state of the art or better. And if you're doing a breakthrough designation, better than the standard of care. Now, the last thing that you need to be thinking about is how do I create this post-market surveillance plan? So now I've used post-market surveillance to identify risks, but now I need to make sure that my risk controls are adequate. And so the best way to do that is so these are post-market surveillance risks that we've already identified. We put risk controls in place. How do we verify that those risk controls are effective? Sometimes you can look at them on benchtop testing. Sometimes you can do, let's say, human factors testing. You could do cadaver testing. You could do simulations. But ultimately, a lot of the things that are use errors, you're going to have to ask users for pro data, patient-reported outcomes, user-reported outcomes. So doctors, nurses, paramedics, what do they think of your device? Do they have any use problems? Is any task difficult to perform? Is the report format easy to understand? Does it have any interoperability issues with other accessories that they might use? Those would be things that you want to definitely be asking yourself when you're trying to figure out what things should I be asking in a post-market surveillance survey or a questionnaire or a plan. And a lot of people think, well, I got to ask everybody all the questions all at once. Like every quarter, I'm going to send out this many, or once a year, I'm going to send out all these surveys asking these questions. No. If you only collect once a year, then if things change over time, by the time you hear about it, it could be almost a year later after it occurred. So ask customers frequently. Randomize it. So ask a little bit every single week, every month, every quarter. Spread it out over the course of the year so you're constantly selecting some post-market information. So whenever there's a serious problem, it will pop up because you're always collecting that data. If you only collect it once a year, then you don't see things like problems with a specific lot or specific problems that are seasonal. You won't see problems when a competitor launches a new accessory that doesn't work with your device. You won't see changes that are caused by seasonality. Like we have the cold and flu season. So you need to be collecting post-market surveillance throughout the year. You should be collecting it randomly through all your customers, not just one or two. And you want to have an automated way of gathering it. These cell phones are some of the most valuable tools that you have for collecting post-market data. It's a way that we order things now. So your customers can order, they can say what the performance of it was, they can give feedback on it. You want to have a sticky device, a sticky software tool where they can give you feedback on the use of that device and give them something in return for doing that. So I highly recommend, build registries, build networks of customers that are using apps that communicate with your sales force, communicate with your customer service department, and give you the information that you need so you can develop the next best version of your device that eliminates some of the problems with the current version, develop a better product than your competitor products, identify cybersecurity problems, identify use errors, and in general, make sure that the risk controls you put in place are effective. So that's what should be included in your post-market surveillance plan. So right off the bat, if you have an implant, you should be getting post-market surveillance feedback from the patient on, what is your pain like? How quickly are you recovering? How is the PT going? That's something you want to gather in a registry. And one of the best ways to do that is these mobile apps. So you should be thinking about that. If you have software, the cybersecurity risks, and just about any device out there, you should be gathering information on use errors. I hope that helps people that are trying to come up with their own post-market surveillance plan, and they don't know what to put in it, what questions to ask. Everything comes from your risk analysis, and the risk analysis starts with inputs from post-market surveillance. So it is a continuous feedback loop. I gather post-market data, identify risks. Those risk controls help me design a better device. And then I see if my risk controls are effective by doing more post-market surveillance. And the cycle continues. I hope that helps everybody. If you have any suggestions for the next week's topic, I will be auditing next week, but I will be back on Friday. I get back very late on Thursday. So I will be doing a live session on next Friday at 12:30 Eastern time. So if you have any suggestions this weekend, I'll post the new topic that we're going to be doing. But lately, post-market surveillance is a hot topic that we're doing a lot on, and we're also covering a lot of software in cybersecurity. And so if you have any suggestions in any of those areas, please post a comment down below and tell us what you want to hear in the next in the next live streaming YouTube video. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.